Hey, this is Kevin from Tame Impala, and this is the LSQ podcast.
I gotta tell you, I have dreamt of having Tame Impala's Kevin Parker as a guest on the LSQ podcast since, well, before the podcast was even fully a reality, so I'm hella stoked that I got to connect with Kevin over Zoom recently for the conversation in episode 61. Thanks so much for pressing play. And Kevin, honestly, is just one of my favorite artists of his generation, truly a brilliant songwriter and producer and multi-talent, whose love of making music and his own admittedly perfectionist impulses drive him to a creative excellence and mastery that I think is, you know, one of the key reasons why Tame Impala is one of the most important bands of their era. And I've had the pleasure of interviewing Kevin on a number of occasions over the years, but I've always wanted to ask him even more. So I guess I would describe this interview as even more Kevin Parker. Let's get into it. Hello, Kevin. It's good to see you.
You too.
What room is this? Where are you?
This is my studio. This is pretty much where I've been. This is kind of like my press hub.
Yeah.
You know, it's where I've been doing a lot of these kind of things. This is where I logged into the Grammys. This is where
wow.
I from kind of this
position.
Yeah.
And you've been home for a year now, I'm assuming, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because you and I spoke almost exactly a year ago to talk about the Slow Rush for a radio thing, and going to see Tame Impala at the Forum would have been one of the last things that I did if I had not. I don't want to say chickened out. That doesn't sound like the right way of putting it. But the fear struck me when the NBA canceled their season that day. You know, it was like the second day of the two shows, and I was like, you know, maybe that's my signal.
I know. It was a weird vibe. And you know, like obviously with hindsight, everything's a lot kind of clearer. But at the time, it was just like, what do we do? You know.
Yeah, nobody knew any better. A couple of my friends who went to one of those two shows were saying how they just sort of were, you know, just kind of maintaining this illusion that like, oh, we didn't touch anything, and we were like, that's fine, we'll be okay, and they were okay, but it definitely seems like a lifetime ago, and now you're in this room that you normally would not have used for this kind of thing, because who did this kind of thing before this?
Yeah,
this
exactly.
Room that you're in now normally would be where you go to create.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, yeah, I've still done kind of interviews stuff from here. Like, you know, being from Perth, Australia, you do a lot of stuff remotely. So it wasn't just like, oh, there's a pandemic, now I'm going to start doing press from my studio. It's like, I'm kidding myself with that thought.
But how long have you actually lived in your current place, and has this room been the room where it goes down?
Yeah. Oh, this has been my studio for a few years now. It used to be my house, actually. So this, we used to live here, and I just had all the walls taken out. And I moved up the road, so now this is just my studio.
So you made it into one big space because that's better to be able to set up your shit.
It's better for me, yeah. Like, because I work alone, I don't need, like, a control room and a tracking room and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's no use for having separate rooms.
There's something about the space, obviously, because you've kept it. You know, you could have just been like, well, let's move on to a completely new recording and writing zone, but that place must have the vibes or something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's my studio. It's my you know, spiritual home. It's my mental home. I don't know how to.
And how close is it to how close is it to your physical home?
It's just down the road.
Nice. So this it's still morning. It's still morning for you. It's like 11 a.m. where you are right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've only just had my morning coffee, so this might take me a little while to.
I'm gonna see if I can pinpoint
get a functioning,
the moment.
Vocabulary.
Gonna pinpoint the moment when the bass drops.
Yeah. You'll know.
But what has your sort of average day been like of late in this year of not being able to do things the way you normally would, but I'm assuming still wanting to do some creative routines?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like just going to the studio in the morning and leaving at night, it's kind of that part has has been unchanged. Um, because like coming here, that's and just working alone. That's something that I did before, and the pandemic didn't really stop it because I didn't. There's no kind of like social interaction, and also in Perth, we've been really lucky. We've been able to do things, like we sort of like we're able to do things that required kind of social interaction, like just filming, like streamed videos and stuff like that. Like
Right, things where there's more than one person in the room with you potentially.
exactly, yeah.
Right, less
And then
dodgy.
and just recently we've been able to do concerts again. So we've done one of those. We did two shows a couple of months ago, which was wild. It was completely wild.
Yeah.
Like just wild that we were doing it, and it was wild to be doing it because it just felt amazing, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, once it got going, it must have just felt sort of exactly the same as it always does. I think that's the thing that's hardest for people to wrap their heads around, myself included. Like going back to doing the stuff, knowing it'll feel the same, and just worrying that it shouldn't feel the same, which is
Yeah, totally. But you know what I've learned from all this is that like humans are amazing at like one adapting and also just like getting back to it. Like I remember there was this thing about shaking hands and like hugging because like in Fremantle we kind of like hug each other when we greet each other. And when the whole thing happened, everyone's like, "Oh my god, are we ever gonna hug again, like as a society, or like shake hands or whatever?" Like they might be done. Everyone might just be turned off it. And I remember as soon as like, cause in Western Australia, we kind of got rid of coronavirus quite early. It's like we didn't have any cases, and everyone just immediately went back to shaking hands and hugging as soon as it was safe. It was kind of just this like instinctual thing just for like human connection. So I was like, oh, you know what? I think people will just sort of snap back to how they used to do things. Like it might take a bit of time, obviously, but yeah.
Are you a
So,
big
yeah.
hugger, Kevin? You don't strike me as a big hugger.
I guess by default, you got to go
Yeah.
in for something, don't you?
You do.
You like in a pre-COVID world, you
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
you can't just sort of stand there. Well, you can, but people might think you're awkward. So a hug sometimes is kind of just the go-to, especially because it's kind of like it's not like yeah, I don't know, it just feels
Yeah, you can do the one shoulder, the half-hearted backpack
Yeah.
thing, and you're like, that's good, it counts.
Yeah.
I just know you're like you're a guy who likes your space, right? So
I like having space. It doesn't mean I need space. Constant. That means that doesn't mean I have like a personal space problem.
have you found though? I know you say you're still sort of doing, you go and your routine is kind of unchanged in this past year. But leading up to when you could actually play shows again, were you feeling inspired or productive? I mean, what had I know you put together the box set for Inner Speaker
Yeah.
that just came out,
Yeah.
but what other things? Oh yeah, also you had a baby recently.
Had a
I
baby.
guess-
Yeah, that happened.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah,
I guess
we
that
had a
sort of answers the question what you've been doing.
a large part of it. Yeah, but like being creative and doing stuff like that, I think we'll always just operate on a different kind of like plane to what I'm doing personally. Obviously like time spent doing something is, yeah, can conflict, but like I just feel like it doesn't necessarily, they don't have, like just because you're busy doing something in your life doesn't mean you're not busy being creative, No, that's kind of like what I like to think anyway.
Totally. Some people have said that, or there's a lot of pressure on artists once quarantine started that like you should get a lot done during this time, and yet it's not necessarily that, depending on what's going in your life, not necessarily that inspiring a time
Exactly.
if you're truly just trapped at home.
Exactly. I mean, like, I feel a little bit blessed because I have kind of spent the last 10 years building a way of doing it where I don't have to rely on other people and like being close with other people. Like, I'm really lucky in that way. Like that's just it. I'm fortunate, But yeah, I forgot what the question was.
I mean, I guess I just wondered if even apart from welcoming your first baby into the world, like have you been feeling inspired lately and productive and working on new stuff, whether music or just other stuff?
I kind of like immediately went into like trying to, or like sort of just naturally thinking of things that I can be doing, or like ways to make the best out of it. I think I'm just like, some people are like, a piece of furniture breaks and like you can either throw it away or make something new out of it. Like get the old pieces of wood and make a chair. Stupidest analogy, but I kind of feel like I had that sort of instinct when it all happened, So it's like I liked to think that it was kind of just an opportunity to do stuff that I hadn't thought of doing before, like doing an acoustic performance, something as simple as that, which I never would have done just because I don't really consider myself an acoustic artist. But I think like this last year has been the year of like trying stuff and not getting judged for it if it sucks.
Yeah, and in that process, have you found that something that you weren't expecting to be fruitful turned out to be fruitful?
Yeah. I mean, like everything's fruitful in a way. Like everything you do, you learn from, which for me is kind of like one of the most important things. It's like learning from experiences. Whether or not you like achieve kind of commercial success or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and some of those things are just like so subtle or nuanced that it's like it wouldn't even be visible to the naked eye. But as long as you feel like it's detectable to you, then you're like, no, I know that was worthwhile for reasons that are not immediately apparent.
Yeah, exactly. And like for example, like I made a film clip for myself. I did it in here actually. I had a green screen and set up the camera and just filmed myself. And just making stupid graphics and stuff out of an old video mixer thing that a friend gave me. I kind of just learned all the kind of, well, just because I had to edit it myself as well, which was kind of funny that I was doing that. But I kind of just learnt a bit of sort of like the terminology and like how to use video editing software, because it's always been like a dark art to me, like someone.
Oh, totally. Oh my God, totally.
Like so
Photoshop too. I'm just like,
yeah, exactly. It's kind of like that's just kind of just this other region of production that I'm like, I have no idea how that works. I'm just gonna leave it to someone else. Like go and do your thing. I've never sort of like I used iMovie once, and I was like, this is.
But how did it? But now that you've done it, how did it work out? Because I also just get the sense from you that when you are teaching yourself to do something new, that you delve into it pretty hard.
Oh, I just go in head first. I just start clicking stuff. I just start clicking stuff and moving stuff around, and like it's an absolute like dog's breakfast for the most part of it, but. Like I sort of like console myself that that's gonna that's gonna have it. It's gonna make a different kind of thing because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But like what I'm saying is like if anything came out of that, it's like me being able to like I've learnt a couple of little like words and stuff. So now I can communicate to my friend who has been shooting a lot of video for us and editing stuff. Like now I can actually have a conversation. That. Yeah. Whereas before I was like, oh.
How did you first learn to record music? Was that completely self-taught?
Yeah, same thing. I just was like, it was with a tape, with like tape decks, just from like a sort of a consumer hi-fi, which I knew how to use because like that's kind of what we listened to when we were kids. Just we had like cassettes of our favorite bands and stuff, so that I knew how to use and kind of just fumbled my way through it. But the same thing, just went in clicking buttons basically. And
it's interesting what you were saying about like the furniture analogy, as much as you didn't like that analogy, about utility. I remember the first time we met for an interview, it was here in LA, at Cafe Stella, I believe. And your mother had sent you a photo of yourself as a little kid with these mason jars that you had used as like a xylophone, which is definitely an example of like the furniture kind of an analogy in a way, you know, is that they weren't being used for that, and so you used them for something else, and in that way figured out what a xylophone was or something.
Yeah, or maybe not figured out anything, just filled some jars full of water and had a great time doing it. But I guess the word is resourceful. You know, like, I like to think that I'm resourceful. And just, I guess I get a kick out of it. That's what it is. It's just like a little zap in the brain. You're like, oh, this feels good. I'm making something out of something.
I get it when I make a Seinfeld GIF, you know?
Yeah.
Where I get high for a minute, you know?
Yeah.
Because I'm just so excited about the idea of it, and then the execution of it.
Do you get that idea when you're watching a Seinfeld episode? You're like, that could be a GIF, or is there a situation and you go, that reminds me of a Seinfeld episode. I'm going to make a GIF for this situation.
Truly both.
Truly. Okay, it happens. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Sometimes I'll just think of like an inflection or the way that, you know, like Elaine said something, it'll get stuck in my head like a melody or something. And then I have to figure out what episode that was in, and make a GIF out of it. Yeah. Other times I'm watching on the TV and then I'm like, oh shit, now I got to find it on the internet and do the whole series of things to make it a GIF.
Which probably doesn't take long, I'm guessing. Given
Not at this
how
point.
many Seinfeld boffs there are out there.
Yeah, no, yourself. I mean, I now I make artisanal custom gifts because I just, you know, now I've figured out all the different steps to be like, no, I do that. I synchronize the captions to the mouth movements and everything.
Bespoke.
It's
bespoke gifts.
When did you start to feel like either hearing music or making sounds was something special for you?
It was always really special. It was always... it always kind of like triggered an emotional response in me that nothing else did. You know, like whether it was something so banal as like the music in Jurassic Park, which was my favorite movie when I was like 8 or whatever. Or like hearing my dad play guitar from the back shed, like on the Sunday before I was due to go back to my mum's house, and it made me really sad. You know, like it always had this place. It was completely different to anything else, and it was just always so kind of powerful, no matter what it was. But you know, like I was kind of happy just being a receiver of music for a long time. I didn't really. It wasn't until I was kind of like a bit older that I realized that I could make it. You know.
What was that? What was the thing that sparked that awareness?
Well, my brother took up drums, and he had a drum. So my parents bought him a drum kit, and I just thought that was incredible.
How old were you at that point?
I would have been about 9, 10. I don't know. It's kind of hazy, but yeah.
So then you started to play his kit.
Yeah. Well, I just sort of saw him playing and I was like, wow, that's amazing that he can do that. Just obviously like immediately wanted to do it myself. Yeah. And I think like at that kind of moment, it all just kind of like cascaded, you know, like I was immediately like, hey, I'm a drummer. Like music, I'm a drummer. I'm a musician. Music is my thing. It was like, get lost, Lego, get out, video games, get out, bike. I'm a rock kid. You know, I'd walk around with like my drumsticks hanging out in my back pocket. Like, I'm like, this is me. This is me, you know? It was quite yeah. I mean, I should be honest, I didn't completely give up on video games and Lego, but, you know, or ride my bike. But it definitely kind of, what I'm saying is it just took over my being.
What was the earliest music you were a super fan of?
Just grunge, everything rock, Nirvana, Silverchair, Smashing Pumpkins. Just whatever my brothers listened to. Not just because they were listening to it, but I guess
That's what everyone was listening to.
yeah. And also I just loved it too. Like me and my friend after school, we just put on. I remember we put on Nevermind, and we just like headbang around the room to it constantly, just the entire afternoon.
Oh my gosh. Did there start to, at a certain point when you were a little bit older, did there start to be any kind of a scene that you were adjacent to, or were there shows that were more kind of modest that, that you and friends went to as you got older?
Yeah, but it was much later because I was still like 11, 12 when at that age. So it was only when I was like 18 that I started to play in. 18 is the drinking age in Australia, so you can play. That was the one I started to play in bars and become part of the Perth local music scene.
Right, but from 11 to 18, you were focused, though. That was a path you thought of yourself as being on.
Oh, 100%.
Like, I'm going to play a show.
Yeah,
I'm going to play a show as soon as I can.
Oh yeah, and it was so frustrating because there were no chances to play. Like, there was the high school like music recital, which is where like everyone who learns like flute and violin and piano plays the piece they've been taught in like tuition. And for a long time that was like the date on my calendar because I got to play a gig, I've been waiting for it, and like I knew the music coordinator fucking hated me because I was like, when's it like she was like, we're not having this fucking rock band play at the recital again. They're like blowing all the parents out of the room because we were just like, I was living out my rock and roll fantasy at this high school recital, and I didn't care. I didn't care that no one wanted to watch because I just felt like I felt on top of the world. And there was that and like the sort of the high school like day. It's called JDC Day. It's, it's like the
And were
the
you
school
still
fair.
playing drums at that point, or were you?
No, I was playing guitar by then, guitar and singing.
Yeah, I mean, and I know that you still nowadays that sometimes it's the drums are the thing that draw you back in, or that can be a starting point. But was it really once you started to become familiar with guitar? I mean, did that immediately feel like your instrument, or do you think of, or what do you sort of think of as your first instrument?
Yeah, it did. I took up guitar pretty soon after. When I moved to live with my dad, he had guitars all over the house. So I kind of just like, it was kind of inevitable, And also, like, I could play guitar along to my favorite songs much easier than the drums. Drums was hard because you hit them really hard and then you not hear the song. And then you stop playing and you're like nowhere near the same part of the song. So guitar was like, I'd look up tabs on the internet and I'd be like, oh my God, I'm playing the song. That's it. That's the song. Which led to, and I was writing my own songs at that time as well, but they were just kind of like I started writing songs on guitar long before I knew how to play anything on guitar.
Okay.
It was kind of just sort of like literally just using one hand, I tried to start a band in year 7, and it's literally like just finding people to be in a band with me. And they were like, yeah, okay, Kevin, sure. And they were playing my songs, and they'd all laugh because I'm only using one hand. Here's my song, goes down, 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 down. That's just like the open strings. Anyway, and they're like, oh my God, this is a joke.
Were you stoked, though, on those early songs, or just stoked that you were doing it, that you could do it, and that you were doing it? I'm curious also, as sort of a follow-up to that, is like, when your more kind of perfectionistic impulses kind of started to take over, like at what point the just beginner's mind and excitement about just like, wow, I can do this, I can make this GIF, I can play this guitar, I can write a song on with one hand. When did that start to turn into more discipline and more wanting to like really hone your skill set?
I mean, I immediately loved making something out of it. Like, I don't know, it's kind of weird because I've always been hard on myself, always. But there's something about looking back at what you've done or listening to what I've just done that's kind of just like a really magical experience. Yeah, and I don't. It's like it's weird because like saying it out loud, it sounds like oh my god, I'm so great. Look at what I've done. But it's none of that at all. It's actually nothing to do with that. It's just that like there was nothing and now there's something, you know. And I'm still like that. Like I can listen back to something that I've just recorded 1,000 times and not get bored and just still be like amazed at it. And again, like it's not on like an ego level. It's really hard to describe. And that's,
well, it's like a joy. It's a joy level. It's not
a joy
an ego level.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So even when I was, yeah, and I guess I kind of had that.
You knew it right away that there was a joy in that for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. And it wasn't even sort of about like knowing that it was a joy. Like it was kind of just like it was like an impulse. I had to keep doing it. But yeah, I mean, I knew that it sounded nothing like all the songs I loved, and so I always wanted to get it sounding. And of course, like along with that came ambition. Like I wanted to be a rock star as soon as I knew about Silverchair and Nirvana, especially Silverchair because they were like a similar age to me. Well, they were teenagers, you know.
Yeah.
Which I guess is like total topic change, but it's like I realize now why representation is important in like music and art and entertainment and stuff.
Culture,
it's like, in culture, yeah. Because I was like, hey, I can do that, you know, like they're like me, they're kids from Australia. So yeah, that was that. Like just recently, I realized that actually.
Yeah, if you don't see it, you don't know that you can do it.
Totally. And it was obviously unlikely that I'd ever reach a point that they did, but I was convinced that I would.
Here we are, and yet here we are.
I know, but it's so like kind of like
it's a silly comparison, obviously,
because
on the one
like
hand,
everyone would have been saying that. Everyone like me would have been like, yeah. It's like, yeah, it's a bit rich for me to say like, yeah, I knew it.
Right. But when you're the thing that makes you go back and fine tune something you're making, the thing that makes you remix the thing or is it what is the goal then? Is it getting it closer to what? What are you striving for when you're improving upon the thing that only you have heard so far? You've got that joy in having made it, but it can be better.
Getting back to that feeling that you had when you just started making it, because nothing ever compares to that. From the moment you sort of make it, let's say, or like create it or get it started, you're forever chasing the dragon. You're chasing the dragon of fulfillment of like writing a song, or you know, like you like from then on I'll only sort of love the song less. But you know, so sort of like perfecting it is an attempt to try and get back there, try and feel the same way again, which sounds depressing, but it's not, because otherwise it'd never get ready. It'd never be complete, you know. And you'd never be able to release it.
And if you overestimated the other part of the transaction, if you overestimated how the impact it's going to have on another person, you know, rather than just pursuing your path, where you're like, I'm just chasing that feeling, and if other people like it for the same reason, that's cool, you know. Yeah. That's how it stays pure. I mean, it's a facile analogy to say I'm usually disappointed in my Seinfeld gif when it's finished.
Oh no, but that's part of it. That's part of it.
I'm like, I synced it up perfectly. Is it not synced perfectly? Maybe let me just do it again. And then I'm like, no, it's because it was just that it was the unexecuted version of it that felt so exciting.
Yeah, the potential of it, the potential, and that's the other thing. That's the other thing that's so kind of like intoxicating about, you know, doing something creative, is that like when you're listening back to it or looking at it and no one else has heard it, the potential is infinite because you're the only one that's heard it. There's no sort of like voice of reason telling you like, it's not one of your best, you know?
Right.
Because in that moment, it's your best. It's better than anything that's ever been done before, you know?
But then how do you keep your vision clear if you're going by your barometer, right, of what's your best work and what's not the best you, because so you don't get too distracted by that initial good feeling and you can call bullshit on yourself and be like, maybe it wasn't that good an idea.
I guess the short answer is your vision isn't clear, but that's okay. Your vision is always like cloud. It's always too optimistic. It's very rarely accurate, which is fine. You just have to see it through. And of course, like when you finish it and play it to people, then that kind of it joins, the song becomes part of reality.
The music by other artists that you tend to absorb in a deep and meaningful way, does it evoke similar feelings in you from music you're working on? Are you looking for a similar feeling from the music you love as you're looking for from the music you're writing?
Yeah. At least early on, that was the kind of the idea, is to like have moments with my music that equal the moments that I have with music that I love. But like, I have to admit, it's kind of like diverged since I started becoming one of those artists, or since I became one of those artists. It's suddenly like, not suddenly, but just slowly, it's kind of like, for me, listening to music now is different to making it. It's a different kind of like value. Yeah. But I don't think that's a bad thing at all. And also because like I never used to compare myself to artists, and I guess now I do. I don't know. But again, comparison is okay. Like, competition is okay. Yeah.
Well, also because other artists can be inspiring, right? I mean,
totally.
Even artists who are making music that isn't even your thing, that it doesn't even push your buttons, but that you're still impressed by and like motivated.
Totally.
To do better.
100%. Yeah. Like I firmly believe that you can learn from music that you hate, or like there's always something to learn from something, even if you think it's awful.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the thing that like admiring music without actually liking it, or without it being part of your taste.
Totally.
Which is just like, I know what stuff pushes my buttons, but also it's a tiny fraction of things, that push my buttons.
Yeah.
And then there's all the other stuff that I admire the fuck out of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what it is. It's awesome and I don't know what it is, and I may never listen to it again, but I can love it while I'm listening to, you know what I mean? Like, totally. I can love an album and only listen to it once.
Totally.
Because I'm just like, it's not for me, but it's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Do you consume much? Are you much of a sort of like, I have to listen to the songs on the charts, or all the important albums in a year, or how voracious are you with new and old music?
For a little while there, I kind of try to make a habit of listening to all the like most popular music. Like a couple of years ago, I kind of really wanted to be like a pop producer. Well, I wanted to work on a lot more pop, and so I kind of like studiously listened to the top 40 like every day in my car or whatever. And then at one point I was just like, oh my god, what am I doing? This is trash. Turn it off.
No, I mean, really, like, what lessons did you learn from that era, and is that not something that still appeals to you the same way, or?
Well, I just learned that you don't have to like all of it.
Yeah.
You don't have to go like, oh yeah, this song is popular, therefore it's a great pop song, because it achieved what it was set out to do. You don't have to think that. You're allowed to think stuff is trash. Like I'd sort of coached myself into never saying that a pop song is trash, and I don't like to say anything's trash, or bad or corny or whatever. But you don't have to like it.
Yeah, and I mean, unequivocally, some of the songs that make it into the top 40 are corny as hell at a minimum. And
Yeah,
corny some of the best stuff is corny
yeah,
also. But
exactly.
it's interesting to think about, like, because you're so fully embodied in your work, you do everything.
Hmm.
It's all you, and then the opportunities arise to collaborate with other artists or
Hmm.
to be truly behind the scenes and write or produce for another artist. And I'm curious, yeah, in 2021, how are you feeling about that style, that kind of collaboration, and how you approach it differently from a song? Does it have to feel different than a song for you?
I'm feeling really good about it. I'm really kind of excited about getting back into that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, kind of finishing the Slow Rush was something that I just felt like I needed to do before I moved on and did more collaborating, more songwriting, more writing my own. So, yeah, that was kind of just something that I was kind of like itching to get started on, and then coronavirus happened, and well, that's not an excuse really at all, but lots of other stuff happened.
Yeah, yeah. Because were you? I mean, but you were. Did you reject, like, the teenage you who was into Silverchair and stuff? Were you like, fuck pop music? Like, did you reject that kind of
Yeah,
mainstream?
of course, which really just like it did nothing but damage. Like having those kind of like walls up and having a rule book about what you can and can't like. But that was part of the existence of it, of like grunge and alternative music. Like it was a reaction to pop music, so it probably wouldn't have existed if that mentality didn't arise.
We were both, born into a different world of genre than now, and like learning to appreciate music as a teenager when you were growing up. It's like there were lines like that. I feel like the young people nowadays who have strong tastes, it's not as, there's much more open borders
Yeah,
between genres for artists now to include each other and start collaborating sooner and
yeah,
actually benefit from it rather than benefit from, like, insisting you're in this other category.
that's it. Which is also fun, you know, like it creates a dynamic. But yeah, yeah. That said, I always loved pop music, even if it was kind of like before and after. I loved grunge. Just a little disclaimer there.
I mean, pop is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, I listened to an interview you did where you talked about worrying initially that it feels like we only go backwards was too pop or whatever, and it's like, in retrospect, it's like, well, yeah, that's because it's because it's a great tune, and you were like, it's like it was so good that you were like worried that it was too pop. Is like, is it? Oh
Yeah,
no,
yeah, exactly.
this song.
Well, I guess I was kind of a lot more afraid of judgment back then. That was on my mind a lot more, like being approved by the indie world, by the world of intellectual music listeners. Which again, it's one of those things you're like, oh, why did I spend so much energy worrying about that? But it is what it is, every artist goes through that, or is affected by that. Yeah.
So as you get ready to be at the now really re-enter the fray of playing shows and touring, and I know that y'all are going to be, knock wood or other surface here here in North America doing some of the big festivals in the second half of the year if it all sticks. And is the plan to do that tour that was going to happen? Will a full scale headlining tour happen at some point?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, if all things permit. I mean, like, my manager reminds me that, we're going to be going out into a post-COVID world, whatever that means. Yeah, it'll be a bit different maybe for a while. But, again, I'm kind of into making the best of a weird situation. Yeah. If it is,
Yeah,
if it is a bit different,
it's that busted chair. It's that busted chair. You're gonna.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was trying to get at. I didn't want to reference myself. It's like what I was saying earlier about a busted chair.
Bringing it back around.
Yeah.
Will you? I mean, are you going to do the show that you were going to do? I mean, or is does this inspire a kind of a reimagining of what the headlining show will be?
Yeah, I mean, 100% I want to. I don't think there's any reason to think that we won't be able to do that.
Yeah.
Other than everything I was just talking about. But yeah, I'm dedicated. Yeah. Like we I can't remember. We got paid something stupid for Coachella, and we spent every dime of it doing the show. So we didn't make any money from that. So, and I'm willing to do it all again.
Yes.
Sorry, boys, we're not making any money from this one either. We're going home empty-handed.
But it'll be a fucking stellar show.
That's it. We'll change some lives. We'll melt some faces.
Please do keep me posted. And thank you so much for connecting to do this. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Of course.
Well, thanks again to Kevin Parker for that awesome conversation. And thank you again for listening to episode 61 of LSQ. If you have questions or feedback, you can reach me on Twitter and Instagram at JennyLSQ, and consider subscribing if you're not doing that already. The next episode, out in a few weeks, features more of kind of like a roundtable style conversation with previous LSQ guests Tegan and Sarah, and Lily from the up-and-coming Chicago band Beach Bunny. And there's also an episode with the producer Pooh Bear a little farther into the summer. So yeah, looking forward to both of those and more. I'll talk to you next time. Awesome.
Did I say that in a real podcast tone?
You did.
I feel like I channeled every podcast I've ever listened to.